This is Photographing the West podcast, the podcast for people who love to explore the western highways and byways while photographing the landscape and wildlife. And now here's your host, Kirby Flanagan.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 72 of the Photographing the West podcast. I'm your host, Kirby Flanagan. Each episode is brought to you by Photo Tees, my wearable art on t-shirts and sweatshirts, available on Amazon and Etsy. Today, it's my pleasure to have back with me 2020 Travel Photographer of the Year, Kerrick James. Welcome back, Kerrick.
Well, thanks. It's great to be back. It's been quite a while.
Yes, it has. How have you been since we last got together?
I've been a busy guy. I've got to say I've been having a blast. I've gotten some just wonderful assignments and trips offered to me. I've since mid-2017, I photographed in Puerto Vallarta, the Dolomites, Venice twice, Iceland on a circumnavigation cruise, the Galapagos on a fantastic cruise and exploration of the islands, the Bahamas, rafted the Grand Canyon for the 15th time, sailed the world's largest square-masted sailing vessel, sailed on it, I didn't run it, in the Western Mediterranean off Italy, explored the Biscay Badlands and have an assignment to write a story on those, and then shot in Kauai and twice in Scotland. So those are the major trips. There have been a lot of other smaller ones. And some of these are for story assignments, and some are press trips. I get offered press trips in some wonderful locales. And then some are pure scouting trips that I take where I'm looking for new story ops or places to take people on a workshop.
You're making me extremely jealous. You know that, huh?
Sorry about that, but someone's got to do it, as they say.
Yeah, true enough. And you do it well. So you've been named 2020 Travel Photographer of the Year by your colleagues in the Society of American Travel Writers. That must be quite an honor.
It really is. I've been a member of SATW, which is the preeminent travel journalists organization in North America, since 1997. That's the first time I've won it. And you submit, it's an annual judged event, and the judges were from National Geo Traveler, actually from the whole National Geo organization, and two other judges from, well, I'd have to look back and see where they're from, but they're outstanding. Anyway, so you would submit a portfolio of 20 images taken over a 2-year period, and the competition is incredibly stiff. It's a beautiful final show to see, and it was a great honor, and I've got to say it's one I've coveted for some time, and it was a tremendous surprise.
Yeah, a very nice one, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, very happy.
Wow, yeah, that sounds like an incredible competition if you're getting people from the Nat Geo to judge the contest.
Yeah, it's a wonderful organization. It's been a big part of my growth and success as a travel journalist, because I've written stories my entire career, but I'm doing more and more of that now, which I think sort of segues into your next question.
Right. As you and I both know, the world of photography has changed a lot since we were last together on March 30th, 2017. So talk about how you've adapted to that.
Yeah, it's staying in business is always a balancing act, a moving target, however you want to put it. Some of the magazines I've contributed to over the years are gone. National Geo Traveler's unfortunately gone now. I used to do work for National Geo Adventure. They've been gone since the last big upheaval, the 2008 recession/depression, depending on your point of view. So there aren't as many magazines. There are websites, and some of them actually will pay for work. I don't contribute to any publication that doesn't pay. As a professional, if they're making money on what they're offering to the public, then I should be paid as well. That's the way I believe. Stock, which for a long time in my career was an outstanding base to my business, has for many years been sliding. And with Getty's recent RF policy, basically if you're not going to have everything with them as royalty free, you're no longer in their game. And I'm, after 20 plus years with Getty, I'm going to drop out. I just don't believe in that. Alame has 150 million images on, and they have their commission scale is sliding, but still better than Getty. Adobe, I tried as a test, Adobe stock, but it's pennies. It's great for the company. It's just not good for individuals. So for me, the stock part of the business is my own file, where people contact me directly and ask if I have images of, say, the Cadillac Ranch, which a magazine recently did, and I got a double-page spread, and that was better than Getty's done for some time. So anyway, I'm doing more commercial travel-oriented shoots, photographing for destinations, for their photo libraries. I'm also photographing hotels and, say, restaurants, for example, at the Grand Canyon, and that certainly helps. And then I shoot and write travel features. So when people ask me what I am, I don't say photographer strictly speaking. I say I'm a travel journalist. I write and shoot features on great experiences in great places, and that's what I do. And also the final leg of what I do, the triad, I guess, is tripod maybe, is I teach, and I've been doing that now for 16 years. I've taught about 70 to this point photo workshops. I've lost track for Arizona Highways, Photoscapes, which they're now called, and my own brand. And then I also do my own custom trips for individuals and for small groups.
Right. That was one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Who are those custom photo safaris for, and how does that work, and how much do they cost, and all that sort of stuff?
Right. I really like doing smaller group trips. I've done photo workshops with groups up to 15 in size. Sometimes it's actually more on Grand Canyon River Trip. And it's just hard to get a personal connection with everybody and really get a feel in real time how they're doing during the workshop, and keep track with them and help them. So I like doing smaller groups, anywhere from 6 to 8 is optimum. And most of my custom trips that I do of my own brand are definitely smaller size. And then I also work with individuals. I have people who have done quite a number of group trips, and they just simply don't want to do a group trip anymore. They know what they want to do, know where they want to go. So I'll set up a custom itinerary and plan everything, and then I just go out with them as long as they want to go. And it's more productive for them, and their cost is not necessarily more or even much more than on a group trip sometimes.
We talked a little bit earlier about your magazine work. Obviously, anybody that's got a magazine subscription knows that they're getting thinner, and some of them are disappearing entirely. So these articles you're doing, where do they get published, if not in magazines?
I've written 5 stories for Outdoor Photographer magazine, although I don't have a recent one, and I'd like to get back in the magazine. I have been featured by them, profiled by them in 2015. And Outdoor Photographer still has a voice, still has a place, and I think it's important that they stay in business, so support them. There aren't many photo magazines left that have editorial that photographers can make their thoughts and share the way that we can. So that's important. Also, every AAA, American Automobile Association's AAA club has their own publication. At least most of them do, the bigger ones. And those are still surviving. Those are still a good market. So Colorado's AAA magazine has sent me on a number of really juicy assignments. I just came back from Venice. I'm doing a story on using a river cruise vessel to move around Venice and not have to worry about hotels. For them, I've also gone to China, to up the Yangtze River, also through the port wine country in Portugal. Just a large number of wonderful trips for them, and that's a great client. Also, Southern California, AAA's magazine is called Westways, and I wrote a nice long 2,500 word piece on Grand Canyon National Park's 100th anniversary earlier this year. That is online, and they still have budget, they still pay, and it's a way to keep your voice alive out there and stay on the radar screen, which is pretty important. Then there are local markets as well. For example, Scottsdale. I live in the Phoenix area. Scottsdale hired me over the past several years to write about, almost 18 articles for online and also for their visitor's guide. It's still writing, it's still photography, and it's It's actually quite a lot of fun to do, to cover the local markets. So if you can write, you like to write, combine that with shooting and seek out your local publications and websites, because everybody needs quality content, and that's the key.
Indeed. That's getting harder to find with all the junk on the internet, I guess.
Unfortunately, yes. And that's a whole different ball of wax there to talk about.
Yeah. So you've been shooting Pentax exclusively for many years. Are you still doing that?
Yes, I am. I just did a shoot when I came back from Venice. I went up to the Verde Valley in northern Arizona. We're having a great fall color year, and the cottonwoods and sycamores were the best I've ever seen them. So I shot around Sedona, Oak Creek with the 645Z, the medium format. It's the only camera I brought on that trip because I knew what I'd be shooting, and also a train that runs through Sycamore Canyon, the Verde Canyon Railroad. And I just love having those big files. In this case, I shot them because I know Arizona Highways Magazine, who I am still a contributor to, was having a call for calendar images for 2021. So I wanted those. And also the railway buys images to use for trade show exhibits and booths. And those are big installations. So having the big file makes a difference. When I went to Venice, for example, though, I took the full frame Pentax camera, the K1 Mark II, and several lenses for that. And I took their APS-C camera and several lenses because I test all their gear. And I've been a brand ambassador for Ricoh Pentax since 2007. So I'm still I think I'm the longest serving brand ambassador. Well, definitely. So the other thing, let me mention this too, is they make their current generation of a 360 camera is the Theta Z1. And I've been using that for commercial shoots and also for pure fun for 360. It's 4K and it's really a fine tool, and it weighs nothing. So you can really bring it with you on a trip and just have a small, light, specialized tripod that the camera actually edits out. It's getting pretty advanced, 360 is.
I've never even tried that, but I've seen some interesting images from it. Mm-hmm. How do you think Pentax is doing financially these days?
Yeah, they don't disclose financials to me. I'm a brand ambassador, but I did glean something from a recent article that their sales were actually up, I just read that a couple of days ago in this last quarter. Now, not hugely up, but up is in this environment is a good thing. They do have a new APS-C body coming out in the spring. I know they've got some new lenses, and they don't introduce stuff really often, new lenses, but when they do, they're outstanding. And I just posted images, for example, this morning on Facebook of St. Mark's Basilica in Venice that was flooded during the recent floods. But I was in there 2 weeks ago for this story, and I got permission to photograph at night during a special tour. And normally no one's allowed to photograph the interior with a DSLR. And I used high ISOs with the two different the APS-C camera and the full frame, and handheld, and just pulled off some great images. It's astonishing what you can do with top flight optics and the current state-of-the-art sensors and image processors. To me, this is all the image quality I'll ever need. But if they keep adding on more, of course, I'll take it.
Yeah, seems to be the name of the game these days.
It does.
I've heard a lot of good things about the 645Z, and I gather you like it.
I love it. Yeah.
What's special about it?
You know, obviously the size of the image file is great for making great big images, and I've had clients do that. But it's the tonal quality of those and the big pixels that's just outstanding. When I shoot the Z, I do less HDR than I would, for example, with APS-C or with full frame, because the image quality, it's such a flexible file. You can do so much with it. And then the body is extremely well sealed. It's really rugged. So I shot with it in pouring rain at the Grand Canyon for 45 minutes while I was doing a time-lapse video with the K1 next to it. And with the newer lenses that have the O-ring at the base of the lens where it mates up with the body, and also the seals in the lens, it's you can shoot. You can shoot in adverse conditions. It's also wonderful not to get dust in the lens, which in the Southwest is kind of more of a concern than rain, quite honestly. I've carried the Z and 4 lenses, and also an APS-C camera and 4 lenses, 3 or 4 lenses, 40 miles in the Swiss Alps a couple of years ago in a photo backpack. And while that's not light, it's not that terrible. And there's something wonderful about knowing you're shooting an incredible landscape scene, the grand landscape or maybe something smaller with this wonderful image quality camera, because you can go huge with it and just blow people away with the quality.
Yeah, I got to believe that. Is it hand holdable or do you shoot from a tripod?
Normally I'd be on a tripod, but for example, I photographed a Navajo cowboy at Monument Valley. It was one of my images in the portfolio of 20 that I won the SATW prize with. And it was shot with the Z handheld with the 80 to 160 millimeter 645 film era lens, which actually is really good on the Z. And I think I was shooting at 1,000th of a second handheld. And I was there with a client, so I wasn't, and they were actually going to be working with this cowboy, so I couldn't direct things, and I couldn't put it on a tripod and make that work. So this is sort of the quintessential grab shot, but it turned out just outstanding. And at 1,000th of a second handheld, it's obviously tack sharp and incredible resolution all the way through. So my advice is be on a tripod if you can. If not, obviously raise your shutter speed and go for it.
Okay. Does it have in-body stabilization or?
No, the Z does not have in-body stabilization. They do make I think it's the 90 millimeter 2.8 macro or portrait lens too, that has in-lens stabilization. All the APS-C bodies and the full frame, like the K1 Mark II, are in camera, and that made a huge difference when I was photographing in St. Mark's Basilica, for example. I mean, some of the shots are at 12,800 ISO at a 60th of a second. That's how much light there wasn't in there, and yet
Yeah.
I was able to record really fine image quality, and through careful processing, they look fabulous. They'll be great for full page magazine. No issue.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It is. I couldn't have done that years ago. I could not have.
Yeah, I'd never do it on film for sure.
Oh, no.
So talk about how your photo workflow has changed over the last few years.
It hasn't changed a great deal. I'm still using Lightroom, working into the latest update, which I think Adobe had some issues with. And I use Classic. I'm not in the cloud yet. Something about me trusting my images to be there when I really need them. So I guess that's my own personal thing. But anyway, Lightroom's great. It gets better all the time. And then I do the majority of my changes, all my editing, obviously keywords in Lightroom, and then do the finishing tweaks in Photoshop, archive those as TIFFs, and then send out samples to editors, guides, whoever, as smaller JPEGs. And then, of course, archive the TIFFs. And that's what I send out to magazines, or the TIFF files typically, or print from those too. And then I also use some plugins. I still have access to the Nik, the former titled Nik collection, and I like Silver FX, obviously, and a number of other software plugins that they have available. But there's new ones all the time, and I oftentimes find out about those from people that I'm talking to when I do shows. They'll say, "Have you tried this?" Or people that are on my workshops. I say, "What are you doing there?" And they show me. So it's a two-way street. Learning goes both ways.
Yeah, that's a great approach. Doesn't always work that way. So
Sure.
talk about the photo safaris that you offer. How do you decide when and where to go, and what's coming up in 2020?
I'm always asking people, where have they been? Where do they want to go? And that includes people I'm talking to or meeting rather on story shoots, like on cruises, for example. And oftentimes they're extremely well traveled. Sometimes people travel all the time. when they can afford to, and they have, they're retired. So I find out about great locations from them, and also people that are on my workshops. I say, where do you want to go that you haven't gone? Or where do you want to return to that you weren't satisfied? So that's helpful. Been traveling the world for 30 plus years, longer than that actually. And places I'd like to go, I haven't been yet, is Antarctica, which of course is becoming more and more accessible for all the wrong reasons, and the Arctic as well, melting of the ice and the opening up of new sea lanes. So there's lots and lots of cruise ships that are going to Antarctica and also the Arctic. And cruising is something I'm writing a lot more about now because I'm asked to. So I've done 25 plus cruises, and I much prefer smaller vessels that are more expedition-oriented adventure class vessels, so you can really get out and get a feel for the location. Let's see, so Antarctica, let's see. I'd love to go and explore the Argentine side of Patagonia. I have yet to do that. I've only been to Australia once for National Geo Adventure, so that's a whole continent. And the Andes, definitely the Andes. And I'd go back to South Island, New Zealand at the drop of a hat. As far my workshops that I have coming up in 2020, I've got on the schedule now for Arizona Highways Photoscapes. I've got 3 for them right now and talking to them about one more. The first one is Route 66 in northern Arizona, a 4-day, 3-night workshop running east to west. The third time I'll have done that one. It's a really fun cultural short odyssey, and that's in September. And then in early October, going to the Bisti Badlands and staying at Chaco Canyon and shooting there as well. Again, that's a little more rugged. We've got an outfitter that sets up a camp and does all the cooking at Chaco, and then we're out early and late with special access in Chaco, and then exploring the Bisti Badlands. In July, early July, this is a really exciting one for me. It's the Swiss Alps, from the Eiger to the Matterhorn over a period of 9 days. And it's a small group. We'll have a maximum of 10. We've got, I think, 2 spaces left, and we'll be staying in mountain hotels, a couple of mountain inns, and doing day hikes, so you don't have to carry all your stuff with you. We'll stay our final 2 nights in Zermatt, below the Matterhorn, at a 5-star luxury hotel where the climbing route starts to the top. So that's going to be outstanding. Yeah. Oh, and so those are for Arizona Highways Photoscapes. I almost forgot that. I'm planning a trip to Scotland, where I've been scouting the last 2 years, and that will be Scotland's Wild West. That's my own workshop. That's a small group, 5 people, over 10 days, later October of 2020. And that'll be out to the Isle of Skye, the Outer Hebrides, and along the Wild West Coast there, which is absolutely fantastic, and it's not overcrowded like so many locations are around the American West.
Well, again, I'm very jealous.
Well, join me. Love that.
Arizona's still home, and the Southwest is still your favorite playground, I gather. What keeps you there, and what keeps you intrigued with the Southwest in all these years?
Well, the Southwest is where I came of age photographically, going to school in Central New Mexico, and then later in Tempe at Arizona State, and I've roamed it for 40 years. It's still my favorite region on Earth, and even though I've driven about literally 1.5 million miles around the West, I got that figure by adding up the mileage on all the vehicles I've had. There's still little locations or little pieces of the Southwest that I've never seen, and I'm shown those by guides or locals that I've become friends with, and they say, I've got this new place and you've got to see it. And that's still happening, and there's still just amazing places. But the Southwest for me is where the bones of this continent are revealed. I just love the landforms and shapes, and they're obviously outstanding. I wrote a story on Monument Valley for Scottsdale, where I talked about Monument Valley as being basically like a stage set for photographers, since we're all thinking about us only, and just waiting for the right light and clouds and conditions, and it's ever changing. So I never tire of roaming the Southwest and then sharing it with friends old and new.
Yeah, it's been shot extensively, to say the least. How do you find new photos to take in that kind of environment?
Great question. Great question. And I'm really concerned about some of the locations in the Southwest that are now almost unshootable because they're overvisited. For example, like Antelope Canyon, lower, and Horseshoe Bend, and there's other places as well. So those are problems. As far as the overshooting, you look for unusual lighting conditions during the monsoon. If you're patient, you can oftentimes have some wonderful storm clouds and storm light, my favorite. I'm always I'm following the weather and trying to be in the right place at the right time. For example, south rim of the Grand Canyon in the wintertime, right after a clearing storm, you'll have it all to yourself. Toro Weep up on the North Rim, I've shot up there a number of times, woken up and shot sunrise and been the only person there. And with 330 million people in the United States, to have one absolutely stunning location to yourself is a luxury that we should not take for granted.
I've been there once, and it's a pretty tough place to.
It takes a time investment, and you want to have the right vehicle because it's a $3,000 tow going out if you break your car.
Yeah,
Truck.
I remember reading that too. So, but it's a beautiful spot.
Oh yeah,
and it's much different than the South Rim.
Yes, one of the keys to the story I wrote for Westways on Grand Canyon was 6 great places you can avoid the crowds at the South Rim, and then one of those was definitely Toro Weep. Really, the key to me is we're loving some of our favorite places to death. I know it's a cliche, but it is so true. So I'm almost hesitant to talk about some of my favorite places in the Southwest or reveal them on a wide basis because we know what's going to happen. They're going to take off. So privately, I tell friends about it and share those locations with people on workshops or individuals. But I'm trying to be sensitive to banging the drum and bringing people to a new place that is otherwise, pretty fragile. I did take a small group into Canara Canyon, for example, north of St. George, between there and Cedar City, Utah. It's a place I've been photographing since 2012, and it's the rare slot canyon that is really exquisitely beautiful, and it has water, and it's most of the time safe. And it was getting so crowded last year that the locals, the people in Canaraville who can control their water source there, were really concerned about the water being polluted that they drink. So they were having 300 plus people a day in this small canyon. So they've made it now 150 people a day max by permit only. And unfortunately, that's the way of the world now. We've long known about the really restrictive permit situation with the Wave, Coyote Buttes North. That could well happen to other locations that we really love. But when you go to a place and there are 50 Jeeps parked out at the entrance to it, you know that it's not long for this world in terms of peace and quiet.
But you've managed to find some places that there still is peace and quiet, I gather.
Yes, but the key to that, I think, is either exploring on your own a lot and looking for the blank spaces on the map, but also doing some research and then if you work with local guides and then you have a rapport with them, you can say, what are you finding on your own in your own free time that is really exceptional? And sometimes they just turn up with a real beauty. And there's a really wonderful location in southern Utah, which I won't disclose. And think of probably 1,000-foot sandstone cliff, and at the base of it, in an alcove that's quite large, is an immense sand dune, and this faces the southern sky. And it's a really theatrical setting. It's not yet well known, and I'm not even going to name it, but that was shown to me by a local guide, and I've gone back twice since then and seen no one there and no tracks, and that's the way it should be.
Have you spent any time in Bears Ears?
Not for some time, actually not for some time, and I'm really disheartened by what the current administration has done with that area. in the same vein, Gold Butte National Monument, which is on the east side of Lake Mead and northeast of Las Vegas, was also diminished in size, and so was Escalante National Monument, Grand Staircase, by a tremendous amount by the current administration. Some of the places that I love there are, I think, now endangered, and also at Gold Butte. So I'm kind of reluctant to name names because, but if people contact me directly and I talk to you, then I can maybe give you some information. It's not that I don't want to share; it's that I just don't want them to become overrun.
Exactly. Any other places you want to talk about in the Southwest, or?
I've been exploring the Bistai, depends how you want to pronounce it, Badlands in northwestern New Mexico. It's not a place that there's a fair amount of information out there online now, and there are little pieces and pockets of extreme visual interest there, but you've really got to be willing to just tramp around and do some exploring on your own. And so I've been assigned to write a story on that for the Colorado magazine, and I'll be doing that. So that's a place I enjoy going back to. Capitol Reef National Park is the least visited of the Big Five in Utah, and it's a longtime favorite since the 80s, particularly Cathedral Valley. So let's hope it stays that way. Let's see. I'm still love the Grand Canyon. I've been hiking it, backpacking it, river rafting it, even climbing it since the early 80s. If you've never done a Grand Canyon river trip, that's an exceptional photo op. So think about that for the future.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that for years, but haven't quite made it to my bucket list yet.
Well, it's gotten really popular again. During the recession, prior to the recession, the Grand Canyon river trips, the commercial spots would sell out a year in advance, especially for groups, family groups, something like that. And then it fell off for several years, and now it's back to being sold out pretty early. So they're already selling 2021 trips now, for example. And but on the other hand, it's fabulous. It's worth it. There's two great companies I've worked with on all of my 15 trips, and I'm happy to give information on both those companies if people want to write to me. And they can contact me through my websites. My portfolio website is kerrickjames.com, and then I have my emails through that. You can write me through that. You can also view and research, if you like. They're keyword searchable 6,400 images on my agpix.com/Kerrick James. That's a long time site that I use for photo editors and researchers. And then I have KJ Photo Safaris, where I post the personal workshops I do. And if you are in the Phoenix area this winter, I'm doing 3 more presentations to local groups, one coming up in December, then also January and March. So if you're in the Phoenix area, I'd love to meet you in person.
Yeah, probably not this year, but we definitely want to go back to the Southwest, so we'll get in touch the next time we do that.
Excellent.
So it's been great fun catching up with you. Thanks for being on Photographing the West again. Show notes can be found at www.flanaganphotos.com, and we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, Kirby. Have a great shoot next year, and let's talk again.
All right, we'll plan on that.
Thanks for listening to Photographing the West podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast in iTunes and leave us a review. Till next time, here's wishing you safe travels and good light.